Threads. We do this every Thursday night from Brooklyn to Brooklyn, New York. I'm off to a great start tonight. 2 guests, 1 hour-ish. Let us know what you think in the comments. Ask your questions. Engage with the show. Tell us your thoughts. We feature your comments. We ask your questions to our guests. It's unlike anything else. At least that's what I say about the show. I don't know if that's absolutely true. Let's meet our guest. We got Jen Briney. Jen is host of the Congressional Dish podcast. It's awesome. Co-host of We're Not Wrong. Very excited to have her tonight. And Siraj Hashmi, my old pal, co-founder of Habibi Bros, creator of, I don't say this lightly, what is possibly my favorite all-time individual Twitter account or X account, creator of the list of accounts that need their phone taken. Jen, Siraj, welcome both to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, absolutely. So we're going to talk about first, I mean, obviously, one of the big stories. We got lots of big stories that we're going to get to tonight. But on the politics front, we don't frequently see something the likes of which we saw today at Jimmy Carter's funeral. This mix of politicians who are typically rivals. They are joking with one another. There's an overall chumminess about this. Trump laughing alongside Obama. Trump and Pence shaking hands. Some icy overtones. Some people refuse to greet other people, but it was like a fascinating case study. And lip readers everywhere have been very busy today. Jen, let me start with you. What do you make of at least this part of what we saw today out of that funeral service? And I think a lot of people are inclined to say, despite the many years, the many war of words between those two men, former President Obama and soon-to-be President Trump, there's a lot of jokes and chumminess back and forth here, Jen.
Yeah, these two are just yakking it up, which it's still kind of like cognitive dissonance for me because I remember the birther days, and I just don't know if I would be able to be so kind to him, but Obama's good at this. So he seems like someone who can just forgive anyone. I know when I was watching this, the person I kept focusing on was Melania, who just looks like someone who just is so angry she has to be back in these situations. Like she just does not want to play this role. And so, yeah, she's the one I'm fascinated with out of all of them. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, there is a lot there to watch with Melania Trump. I wonder if it's you kind of have this sense of like a bit of a reluctant first lady, not in terms of like I think the projects that have been most important to her, and we'll see what gets prioritized. But you're right, that is kind of awesome or interesting to watch. Siraj, what do you make of what we saw today? I mean, a lot of people have been saying, well, if it's, and I'll ask this to Jen as well, if Donald Trump is really this big sweeping threat to democracy that you've made him out to be, is it cool to be sitting there if you're one of the Democrats just kind of yucking it up, as Jen says?
Well, it is all political theater, and it doesn't get more theatrical than this. And seeing Trump and Obama yuck it up, cracking jokes. I keep thinking of like one of those, goofs with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly and Step Brothers. They're like yucking it up, but like they're actually insulting each other. No one can really hear them, but they're just being like, I'm going to take you out back. I'm going to beat the piss out of you. That would be pretty funny if that were the case. But I actually think there's some actually amicable relationship that can be salvaged here. And it's also a sign that, and compared to the George H.W. Bush funeral, where Trump was president and everyone was icy towards him, it seems to be the ice is, melting a bit. And that they realize, obviously, Trump doesn't have another election to run in. And so he's going to be president for the next 4 years. And there's not much that the opposition can do about that. They can try to impeach him, but most of the American public can see right through all those attempts. So it seems to me that Trump is finally joining what would seem to me would be the cool kids club or the uniparty, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's similar to this is a different thing, but Jen, I want to get your perspective on this. This has to do with what we heard out of Donald Trump earlier this week, wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Jen, I have no idea. We have this, remember this old conversation about Donald Trump? We said, like, do you take him seriously or do you take him literally? And there was always this difference between people in mainstream media, newsrooms, and journalists. And I think we tended to take every little thing he said literally, whereas like his voters didn't really take him literally, but they took him seriously as a candidate. They're like, he's going to speak in imprecise ways, but we know what he brings to the table here. Are you buying or selling this idea of even some of the maybe more laughable ideas, like here, either this one, which is the Greenland. I promise not to do this to Greenland. This idea of annexing Greenland or Canada, or I mean, listen, he's talking about things, Jen, we don't frequently talk about. I don't remember the last time someone said, let's rename the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, I feel like in these next 4 years of Trump, I'm not going to take the bait the way I did in the first 4 years. He says a lot of things, but I think the most important thing to do is to watch the actions and to especially watch Congress, because so many of the things he says that he wants to do, he can't do without Congress being on board. And this Greenland thing, like, this just feels like a rerun. I remember when he said he wanted to take Greenland in the first administration and he didn't do anything. So this I'm ignoring. Renaming the Gulf of Mexico, like, who cares? But also, I'm ignoring it. These are just things that he's saying. I think he likes the attention that he gets. And so I'm just focusing a lot less from here on forward on his words. And I'm going to focus a lot on the actions. And by that, I mean executive orders and things that he's working in partnership with people in Congress on. And I do find it fascinating, like going back to the Jimmy Carter funeral and the way that the Democratic presidents are reacting to Trump. I'm also wondering if the Democrats are seeing that this is a person that reacts very well to flattery. And so I'm wondering if they might see some opportunities to work with this insecure man to maybe get some things done. So I'm hoping that we will just, as the people watching him, I'm hoping that we will tone down our own reactions and just pay attention more to substance as opposed to the fluff. And I think a lot of this is fluff.
So Jen, let me ask you a quick follow-up there if I can. What did you most learn in that vein from the first Trump presidency in terms of how you uniquely will position yourself and how you'll approach the second one?
So one of the things that was really hard for me in the first Trump administration is I would wake up in the morning, check Twitter, and there would be something insane and I would react. I'm not doing that anymore. Well, first of all, I'm not checking Twitter first thing when I wake up anymore. But also like I said, like, I'm just going to say, is this a thing he can actually do? Is this a thing he can do today? And I'm just going to stay calm no matter what that takes. And I know that's easier to say before January 20th, but that's what I need you to. Guys, I need to take this. I'll be right back.
Okay, of course. Yeah. Siraj, last time you and I spoke, at least in this vein, you joined us for our election night show. You were talking loose predictions, what to expect, when this closes, when that closes. I feel like so much has happened since we last had you here on that vein. Let me ask you a version of what I just asked Jen. You know, what did you most learn from the Trump presidency that you might learn to view differently this time around? Are you just saying, you know what, I'm here for the insanity, let things happen as they're going to. I'm all about the chaos and shaking things up because, while it sounds like a joking question, I actually think that's what a lot of people voted for. They want intentionally to shake things up. And if you have some laughs along the way, like, I promise not to build Trump Tower on the shorelines of Greenland, people are down for that type of stuff.
So what I really learned from the first Trump administration is that Trump might be the funniest president we've ever had, at least in my lifetime. And that's actually his comedy, his comedic timing and his sense of humor, whether it's intentional or not, it won me over. So while in his first term, I was a bit more liberal. And I would say over the course of that administration and into the Biden years, I pretty much went, oh, this guy, yeah, like, let's go. Every time he says something that like actually causes the liberals and the left to absolutely melt down, I'm like, let's go, baby. Like, yeah, do it. So like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf America, let's go, let's do it. It instills national pride. Greenland, let's go, let's get it. I mean, we don't have to buy it, we don't have to invade, but it is of strategic importance to the American interests, both militarily and security, as well as all the resources that Greenland has. They don't have the infrastructure nor the economic ability to harvest all of their resources. They get like, what, $17 billion from Denmark? And think about the biggest economy in the world being like, hey, we see what you're doing over there, Greenland. you want to maximize that potential. I think that's the opportunity that Trump has in front of him. It doesn't come to me as like a land grab, like we're actually going to make Greenland the 51st state or even the U.S. territory or Commonwealth. I see it as I can see it in the same way that America helped liberate Panama from Colombia to build the Panama Canal. It would be very much in the same vein. And my hope is that it benefits both Greenland and the United States.
Jen, do you see any historical comparison to this? I mean, we just wrapped up an interview that'll be on our social channels with Rich Rubio, who's a former guest we had. He kind of gave me a little bit of the historical perspective. But if I'm not wrong, Jen, I believe it's 11 total presidents have overseen territorial expansion. And that's the geographically small stuff, like the Northern Mariana Islands under Truman. And then that's the really big stuff like James K. Polk. My working hypothesis, and this is from right after the election, and we did it on the show a lot, Jen, was that I think Trump just wants to expand the map in some capacity, because I don't know that there's any bigger legacy than to say, hey, that land used to not be the US's and now it is because of Donald Trump. I'm sure he would love to like give it more of a Trumpian name as opposed to just America. But Jen, how do you see either the history on that context or Trump's territorial expansion? Because yeah, there are funny overtones to it, but obviously you get into geopolitics in a place like Greenland, you got a people who have largely been lobbying for or fighting for independence from Denmark. I don't know what the appetite will be for the 58,000 people who live there, pretty small population, by the way, to now join the U.S.
Yeah, I could see him trying to rename it Trump Land if he ever got control of it. But so I don't know. I'm not that good of a student of history to tell you if there's comparisons here, but just looking at the situation that we have now, I really don't think that this is something that would happen. When I see him talking this way, I see that he's someone who makes threats and scares people. I mean, he even said at the convention that, you know, fear is something that he uses to operate with, obviously not in those words, but I think he's scaring the people of Greenland and will kind of make a deal in order to get our corporations in there in order to have access to the minerals, because Greenland has a ton of minerals. We know that for electric car batteries, a lot of those batteries need minerals. We know he's now besties with Elon Musk. I could see the corporate side of this, them wanting to have access. And I could see him being like, okay, I've already threatened to take you over militarily. So how about we make a deal instead? You let our companies come in here and have access, and hey, you guys are going to get rich too. So I just see this as the initial offering being so bad to the other side that he's hoping they'll meet in the middle and help our corporations get rich. That's my guess about what's going on here. But it could just be Trump word vomit. Like, who knows with this guy? And this is why I don't really pay attention until there's actions.
You know, I remember we used to say if you're outraged about everything, you're outraged over nothing, as it pertains to Trump with like journalists or mainstream newsrooms or whatever it is. It's like, oh my God, can you believe this thing that he tweeted? And I get it. And like Siraj and I were talking there a moment ago, I probably used to be the same way. I'm talking like peak early on 2017 Trump, like clutching your pearls of like, oh my God, every little thing. Siraj, Jen brings up a good, and I'd wondered this about the Greenland thing too, is this idea of lithium and coal or other rare earth metal depositories in a place like Greenland. But the Elon Musk factor about it specifically, whether it's like lithium and battery components for electric vehicles or in general. Siraj, you and I haven't talked much about it, but since we have spoken last around the time of the election, we have much more of some sense of what Elon Musk's role is going to be. Obviously, Democrats are calling this like a co-presidency. Seems like they're trying to kind of needle Trump a bit. Siraj, how do you see this kind of lame duck transition influence of Elon Musk and your expectations for Musk's role after the 20th of January?
And that's a loaded question, because Elon Musk has his hat in everything, right? And you know, during the pre-Trump days, Elon Musk was still one of the greatest, I would say, recipients of government contracts through SpaceX, through pretty much cultivating his lithium battery technology. And I see that continuing. I see the partnership between Trump and Elon Musk as mutually beneficial. I know that Democrats are going to try to drive a wedge. I think initially when it came to Elon, I mean, like if you think about it, and I think I cite John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, when talking about Elon Musk. A lot of Americans see him as the modern day, in real life, Tony Stark. And when you see someone like that vouch for a president, people pay attention. So, and a lot of people view Elon Musk as one of the smartest minds that we have in the world today. Now, of course, people can be wrong at all times. I'm not saying that Elon Musk is infallible, but I would say that given what he's contributed to society and to the world, he carries a lot of weight. So I will, I am expecting that that DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, actually does what it says it will do. But in addition to highlighting all the government waste and expenditures that is going to things that don't need, that U.S. taxpayer money doesn't need to be going to, I'm hoping that at least the government through the NSC and through all these other different parts of the federal, of the executive branch, they actually do what they're recommending, because it doesn't, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy can make all the recommendations about cutting all this government waste, but the government actually has to follow through on it.
You mentioned the Tony Stark thing. Do you both remember that Elon Musk was in Iron Man 2? There was like a cameo. I think they were down in Monaco. Do you remember that? It was kind of like a silent little wink from the Marvel Cinematic Universe that he is in fact Tony Stark. He played himself. This is like way back in the day. I know it's Iron Man 2.
That was 2010.
Yeah, we're going way back here. This is way pre-Doge Elon Musk. But in the I understand in the great MCU pantheon, people tend to put Iron Man 2 down by the bottom of the list. I didn't mind it myself. Jen, so Siraj brings up Doge, which I really want to get your take on, because understanding Congress as well as you do, my take is, or my view of this is, it's not actually a department. You probably need Congress to pass that. Congress needs to enact whatever the recommendations are anyway. I have no doubt, Jen, there's going to be a lot of window dressing on these things. You're going to have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. They're going to make these recommendations. They're going to be running out to TV cameras, et cetera. They're going to say, we're making all these grand cuts. Jen, what is the reality for Congress in terms of what they then have to do based off of any of these recommendations that may come from Doge?
Yeah, I think Elon's getting played with Doge because it's a fake department. It's not real. And it's essentially going to be tasked with making a report, which is something that can be totally ignored by Congress. And I see this all the time when there's a big stink about something in the country and Congress is like, we're going to act. And so they make a commission, and then the commission makes a report, and then the report disappears into the ether. So I see this being very similar. Congress is going to do what they're going to do. I don't think Congress cares at all what Elon and Vivek are going to recommend. I think this is going to be something that takes a lot of the media attention away from Congress so that Congress can do what Congress is going to do. I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we pay any attention to it at all. I think Congress is the one that is empowered when it comes to spending, and that is where our attention should be paid.
Siraj, what do you make of this new look Republican Congress? I mean, yes, it has a majority. I understand the conversations to say, oh, Donald Trump got a sweeping mandate. At the end of the day, at least in the House of Representatives, Siraj, which you and I used to cover, you're talking about a teeny tiny narrow margin of window, right? I mean, you're starting off the new Congress with basically a true vote differential of like 1, maybe 2. I know those numbers will be padded a little bit later on in the month or later on into the spring. But Siraj, what do you think the approach should be for any of those Republicans? I mean, any one member of the House, remember, I always used to view members of Congress as like independent contractors. Like, yes, they do belong to the two parties, but at any given time, Siraj, as you know, it takes one. It takes a Thomas Massey to be like, I'm not going to play the game.
Oh, yeah, it happens all too often. I'm actually very surprised when Mike Johnson won the speakership on the first ballot. I was not really expecting that. But, yeah, I mean, who's to say that I don't think Congress is going to have as much of I would say, I don't know if they're going to be as like, if they're going to react as strongly to Trump wanting to cut different parts of the federal government. Say, for example, the education department, something he's talked about cutting. Yeah, I can see Democrats obviously riled up, but I don't see Republicans basically opposing that. I think he gets that across the finish line. And, it's one of those things where I don't know all the legal pathways that Trump could get, like, cut all this government waste at the recommendation of Doge. But he has considerable executive power. I mean, the executive branch has only grown in power, at least in my lifetime. I'm almost 40 now, so seeing where it started to where it is now, I think he find a pathway to be able to implement those changes. And with the slim majority that Republicans hold in the House, he certainly isn't going to pick anyone else to serve in his cabinet from there, considering how slim that majority is. And whether they decide they're going to move forward on funding foreign wars that a lot of Trump supporters don't support, they want to have that money focused on Americans. I can see that as being the main axe to grind between both the establishment wing of the Republican Party and the MAGA component. And I think ultimately Trump will probably tip his finger on the scale and try to end that war as quickly as possible.
By the way, I do want to shout out, we got a few thousand viewers watching on X, a few thousand over from Rumble as well. Hello to everyone. If you haven't watched the show before, please, I almost said tune in. Well, yes, obviously tuned in you are. But let us know your comments, ask questions. I'm going to kick them to Siraj and Jen as well. So Jen, Siraj brought up an interesting point, which is the legal pathways of things like executive orders or other things. What will you be watching for on like the parliamentary procedure side as Congress goes through? We'll get into budget reconciliation a bit heavier coming up in just a bit for the show. But, you know, whether it's DOGE or like those top few things, we talk a lot, Jen, about the first 100 days of a presidency, which I guess comes from FDR and like the New Deal and like how aggressive those first 3 months were. Trump before has said, I remember when he became president the first time, he kind of bemoaned the fact that there's this like 100-day thing. He's like, I don't know how much you can really do in 100 days. He's like, you know, but what will you be looking for in those first 100 days, especially as Shiraz brings up a good point, this idea of, you know, executive orders, and you mentioned it earlier before, those things that Trump can do. And then I think more powerful than the executive orders themselves are Trump's ability to sell what he did in the executive order, since perception drives reality.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at these first 100 days, there's two events that are going to happen that we're not really talking about, but I think are going to gobble up a lot of those 100 days, which is that we're going to hit the debt ceiling and we have to fund the government by March 14th. It was supposed to be done by September 30th of last year. It's still not finished. We're operating under a so-called continuing resolution, which just is when you take last year's funding and like continue it. And so those are going to be big fights before we can even get to budget reconciliation and all these things that they're saying they want to do, whether it's immigration or the tax cuts or any of that. You can't do tax cuts unless you raise the debt ceiling, because it is going to increase the debt. They always do. And you can't really get to budget reconciliation for 2026 until you fund 2025. So, yeah, I think those are going to be taking a lot of air out of the room in the first 100 days. And I don't think that the Republicans in Congress are necessarily prepared for that, because most of the conversation I'm seeing is about these dreams that they have for the first 100 days. But I think reality is going to kick them right in the teeth.
We're going to take a very quick break just to hear from our ad sponsors, because we like paying the bills. We like eating hot lunches, and they keep the lights on in this place. But we're going to come right back with Siraj and Jen after this for budget reconciliation. It's like my favorite topic. But these are also my favorite sponsors. All right, folks, if you're serious about investing, you got to know all about the good folks over at public.com. Scan the QR code if you want to become a more informed or a more serious investor, or head on over to public.com/CT. You can invest in everything: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. They even offer some of the highest yields in the industry. For instance, the ongoing bond account, 6% or higher yield. It remains locked in even as the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates. And remember, they are expecting to cut rates at least 2 times here in 2025. What sets Public apart from the rest is how they give you the tools you need to make informed investment decisions. They have a really cool built-in AI tool. It's called Alpha. It doesn't just tell you if an asset is moving, it tells you why that asset is moving. That context is crucial for investing. So that way you can actually understand what's driving your portfolio's performance. Public.com/CT to learn more. Siraj, we were mentioning budget. Okay, so anyone who's watched the show every week is like, JD, shut up about budget reconciliation. But I think it's so important. But Siraj, I think my question for you would be, if you are a Republican member of Congress, or you're someone in the know down here, and you're sort of given this choice, and on the one hand, it's like tax cuts. Number one, we're extending the Trump tax cuts from 2017. We want new tax cuts on the table. We want to unleash the American financial markets. Or on the other hand, if they have to choose, behind the second door is immigration and energy policy. Where do you put your focus or your priority as an incoming Republicans? Is it on tax cuts, or are you trying to follow through first and foremost on a lot of those campaign promises on immigration? They may have to make some choices coming up.
Oh, yeah. But I think most Republicans, if I was entering the House or Senate as a Republican member, I would obviously be focusing on the campaign promises. And immigration, I think, is a top priority. Energy policy, yes. But I think you have to focus on reestablishing law and order and re-implementing the rule of law, something that hasn't really been followed in the last 4 years. And I think with respect to protecting American citizens, that comes first and foremost. That's the highest priority. I mean, if you can't do that, you shouldn't be leading this country. So in that regard, if there's going to be the mass deportations that they talked about, the reinforcing of the border security, that is number one. And I don't think there's a single, well, there might be a single Republican, but there's not going to be many Republicans, I should say, who would not prioritize that over tax cuts.
But that's the thing though, right? Is that you can't really lose very many, if any of them. That's the thing, right? You're like, there may not be one. Well, maybe there is one. And we are in a situation where it's
Congress, you don't need Congress for the mass. You don't need Congress for the mass deportations. You don't. I mean, you need them maybe for funding of border security, but in terms of mass deportations, DHS has a massive budget.
Yeah, and Tom Homan seems very drilled in. I've watched all of his media interviews very closely. Jen, I'm going to ask you that same question. Either what would you prioritize, or maybe more realistically, what do you think will get prioritized? We got people like Larry Kudlow. If you remember Larry, he was one of the Donald Trump's chief economic advisors the first time around. Obviously, he's pro putting tax cuts front and center. But a lot of Republicans are going to say, well, maybe instead of one big, beautiful bill, if we got to do two bills, which Trump was talking about today a bit, maybe put the focus on energy production and immigration. How do you see that playing itself out? And Jen, any other context on budget reconciliation to help people understand? Because I really think it's how we get so much done in Capitol Hill these days, especially with a very slim majority.
So I'm not going to make any predictions of the future because these people never do what I think they should do. But what I would do is that I would focus on immigration and energy policy in the reconciliation bill, because that is what would essentially be filibuster proof. I also think that's where you're most likely to get, if the Republican Party is going to have unity, I think that's where it's going to be. And that's also the area where the Democrats are just going to be hard nose. When it comes to the tax cuts, the Democrats can be negotiated with. So I don't even think it's necessarily required that be done via budget reconciliation, because I've seen tax cuts that they say they're against get extended via government funding bills because there's something else negotiated in there. So for instance, I think that if the Democrats from New York, California, Nancy Pelosi, looking at you, got the SALT deduction reinstated, I think they'd be willing to gamble with some of the other tax cuts that the Republicans want. And I think that could actually be done with government funding. So just strategically, I think the stuff that the Democrats won't play ball on has to be budget reconciliation. And I don't think that tax cuts are necessarily that. I think there's other avenues.
I mean, Siraj, the advantage to using reconciliation, and this is true too when Democrats did it, Biden used it, if I'm not mistaken. Jen, please correct me if I'm wrong. Biden used it both for the American Rescue Plan and then for what they called the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, which was a climate bill. Yeah.
Of course, it's basically, right? Some people call it the Green New Deal, the Green New Scam, a massive climate bill, EV support, whatever it is. It obviously wasn't like an Inflation Reduction Act. But Siraj, it does show you that Democrats criticized Trump for using it and then turn around and were like, well, we got so small majorities also. We're also going to use it. Siraj, what do you think how do Democrats approach this upcoming Congress, knowing they're like, they don't have the gavel on any committees. They're going to try and litigate a lot of this through the press. But ultimately, I feel like they're pretty limited about what Republicans try and get done using the majority they do have.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. This is like the one time where I'm not entirely sure what the Democratic agenda is supposed to be. I know that there's been a kind of an emphasis on healthcare reform, which is interesting because that's what they campaigned on during the Obama years. And Well, what's wrong with Obamacare? Is there something wrong with it? Why would you be going for healthcare reform? And I thought the Luigi Mangione shooting of the United Healthcare CEO, it almost seemed kind of, it was. I don't believe in many coincidences, and I'm not going to get too conspiratorial, but I will say it was convenient timing to break out the healthcare reform, and then a CEO of one of the largest health insurers gets murdered. So, with that being said, back to Democrats. They're going to oppose, and I think they'll rely heavily on legacy media in terms of pushing their message out, because at least in this election cycle, the legacy media took a massive hit, credibility-wise, but also messaging-wise. They realized that they lost pretty much most of America, and I think a lot of Americans saw through their BS. And it's going to be a different. It is a different ball game this time around. I think a lot of Trump supporters, a lot of Republicans, and even independents, and maybe even some Democrats, at least don't take everything that the legacy media tells them at face value.
Jen, how do you see Democrats approaching this? And also, I wonder, to Siraj's point, like, what are the big learned lessons for Democrats? I feel like the dust is still settling a bit from the election. There was a lot of kind of Monday morning quarterbacking after, but this will be the first time, though. A lot of them are back in Congress now with Donald Trump in a while. How do you approach this if you're a Democrat in Congress? And are there things that maybe you did in the past that you said, yeah, well, clearly that didn't work. It's time for the second course of action to try and fight Donald Trump?
Yeah, this might be an unpopular opinion. I mean, I'm not a Democrat, but like if I'm speaking as one, this probably isn't something that they would say. But if it were me and I were in charge of that party, I would stop with the "we are just going to resist him no matter what" thing. I think Donald Trump is manipulatable. I think he wants everyone to love him. And I think he was a Democrat. And I think there is a scenario in which he's the guy who wants to make a deal. So kiss the ring and see if you can get some stuff done in places where we agree. I mean, in this country, we have a lot of problems. And I know that I have plenty of Republican friends because I'm more, a little blue. I have plenty of Republican friends and we agree on a lot of things. So there are areas where agreement can be made. And if it were me, I'd be looking for those right now, because I know that the American people are just really sick of the other party being portrayed as the enemy. And what we saw in the first Trump administration is the Democrats went so over the top with their resistance to Donald Trump. Like the whole Russiagate thing, like it was years of us being told that the man is a Russian agent. We spent millions of dollars on an investigation and the Mueller report comes out and it goes, yeah, sorry, he didn't do it. Like he definitely tried to cover up the things he didn't do, but he didn't do it. And so I think there's a lot of trust that is gone with the media that played that up and with the Democratic Party that like ran on that. So I think that at this point, a new strategy is needed. And I just think that we're at the point now that like maybe we attract more, flies with honey. I think that's the phrase. That's what I would try to do. I don't see that coming with the Democrats. They're already taking heat in liberal media for even suggesting that they work with the man. So I think we're going to see a lot of the same. The Democrats never seem to learn their lesson, but I would do things differently.
Speaking of learned lessons, Siraj, because you and I have talked about the role of kind of legacy media versus independent media, which all of us are a part of, and we're all kind of part of the conversation for. Are there learned lessons on the media side, Siraj? Maybe those that were very quick to say Russia, or this, or Orange Man bad. And I feel like they've also got to be sitting there licking their wounds a bit like a lot of Democrats after the election saying, all right, well, clearly anything we thought was the case is not what the silent, moderate majority of voters in this country thought.
I just, in the same token that Jen said that Democrats won't learn their lesson, I don't think legacy media will learn their lesson either. I do see that you'll have your exceptions, right? And like John Fetterman and even AOC for that matter. I feel like those two, at the very least, are doing something different. And they might be doing something different from each other, but they're doing something different from the chorus of Democrats that are basically saying, we must resist Trump at every single turn. As far as the media goes, most people have turned off their TVs. I mean, they're not paying attention. And honestly, that's the best case scenario. The fact that the power of the media has become decentralized. There's no longer a monopoly on people's attention. And the fact that all of these independent outlets have come up, they're rising through the ranks, they're getting viewership, and people have choice, right? They don't have to watch anything that they don't want to. And they've actually made it clear with this election that they simply reject the overarching narrative that is being pushed by the legacy media. I mean, as Jen said, the rhetoric has been so over the top that it's led to this point. But in the process, Trump was shot, and he was nearly almost, there was another assassination attempt, but they used lawfare against him. It only made him stronger. And at this point, like, yeah, you tried everything and nothing worked. Why not try to, honey attracts more bees than vinegar? Maybe that's a strategy. I mean, Democrats, I used to be one, and I was big on the anti-war movement. I know I've said this publicly all the time. Like, I voted for Hillary in 2016, and then I just I think 2020 really. What was that? Was that a sound effect?
I think it was a bomb.
Was that a drone? Is there a drone over my house? Is Obama coming through?
You live in Jersey?
Dude, I might as well. In any event, just to wrap up my point on this, there's so much more to be done for the American people. Why is it that we're constantly dividing people by their beliefs and not actually finding common ground on things that people actually want to better their lives with?
Or common threads, if you will. Dun, dun, dun. See that? That's the name of the show. Okay, so let's talk about obviously what is one of the other big, arguably the biggest issue of the day, and that is, of course, obviously the ongoing efforts to try and contain as much of these fires in and around the beautiful city of Los Angeles as possible. Jen, I do want to start with you on this, and I know that this strikes a little bit closer to home, and so I'm extra grateful for your time and consideration to be on the show tonight. But this is something that has been politicized, perhaps predictably here. Jen, there's this kind of war of words a bit between Governor Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump. Reading now from The Hill, Newsom received criticism from Trump over the massive wildfires, with the president-elect saying the governor should have signed a declaration to pump additional water through the Golden Gate to avert the situation. No two tragedies are exactly comparable. I am reminded of a little bit of the post-January 6th playbook here, at least in terms of what Trump is doing, which is let's not forget that here's all the things that Democrats could have done, coulda, shoulda, woulda done ahead of time, and it's not there, and Newsom's kind of firing back. Jen, what do you make of kind of the politicization of things like this? Because no matter, if you are a Democrat voter, you might be more inclined to believe one side. If you voted for Donald Trump, you're more inclined to believe what he said. And obviously we're having this political fight that's breaking out at a time when, protecting people and protecting property are, of course, most important.
Yeah. And like you said, this hits a little close to home to me. And I do want to apologize to your audience for taking off for a second, because that was my sister who is in the middle of evacuating because the fire is coming right at her. So I do get a little upset about this. And I did see Donald Trump's tweet about Gavin Newsom. And I think what really upset me about it is that I know the bill that he's talking about, that he's trashing the governor for not supporting, and it had nothing to do with filling our reservoirs. In fact, we got so much rain in the last 2 years in California that our reservoirs are actually doing pretty well. So we don't have any empty ones, and we've had droughts in the past where they are very empty. We don't have that situation right now. The bill that Trump was referring to, and this is an effort I've seen the Republicans trying to do for years, there is an effort to redivert water resources in Northern California to the Central Valley where we have giant agribusinesses. That's what he's referring to. So I think he is setting up the stage to have that fight again in the 119th Congress, but this is not the time. The hills are still on fire. So he really upset me with that. I was triggered, if you will, because I think he's counting on the fact that the American people don't know anything about this bill. And the only reason, if I wasn't reading the congressional record every day, I wouldn't know anything about this bill. So people believe that. And it's just really not helpful at this time. Like, there are plenty of criticisms to be had about the way California has managed our resources. I have lots of problems with what's happened this week in Los Angeles, especially with Mayor Karen Bass. So let's not make stuff up. Like, let's have criticisms that are valid instead of putting BS out into the ether. And that's what he did. And I'm pretty angry about it.
I'm grateful for your context, and I wish you and your family the absolute best. I mean, that is absolute most important. And a note to our viewers, we had the QR code up there for the Red Cross up there. We'll continue to put it on. Siraj, I think to Jen's point, like I said earlier in the show, perception drives reality. I never expect the average American to even know how to find a piece of legislation, let alone spend all of the hours that we probably do kind of going through them or actually sifting through to figure out what's real and what's not. But Siraj, I think the thing that like kind of still bugs people, and for anyone waiting for this great presidential pivot from Donald Trump, and I get it, we're sort of used to this. It's Trump taking to his platform of choice earlier today and calling him Governor Gavin Newscum, which, like, obviously at this point, no one is surprised that Trump's a name caller, Siraj. I think the question is just like, come on, man, like, do you have to do that now? Isn't there like some degree where people are like, all right, I just want like a little bit of softening of Trump on the outside. He could be a bully to other people. He could stand for American values, but like, isn't there like a little bit of like a, come on, man, you got to go that far?
No, I think this is the time to go on offense for sure. I think it's actually the time to call out the BS that we're seeing from a lot of failed leaders. And Gavin Newsom is like at the top of the list in terms of failed leadership. In California, if you said what he inherited and what he turned into is honestly, it's depressing really to think about how far California has fallen in the last 20 years. Gavin Newsom has not obviously responsible for all of it, but he's responsible for a good chunk of it. And so I think his priorities, his legislative priorities, is the way he's governed that state. The fact that there's been such a massive exodus of people from California it's a testament to how they view his leadership. I don't know if this is going to be a massive red pill moment for a lot of Californians, especially those who are affected by the wildfires in Los Angeles. But once it becomes personal and once it comes to your home, I mean, pretty much all bets are off. And they're absolutely entitled and have every right to be as enraged as they are at both Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who was not even in the country when the wildfires started, and Gavin Newsom, who at best has just been there for the media attention.
Jen, I'll give you the opportunity there to defend your home state, to agree with Siraj. You know, obviously we've made a lot about the kind of red or blue state exodus into a lot of red states. Anecdotally, I think it's easy for people to look at the cracks in any community in any state. God knows we got them here in New York. I mean, to listen to the national conversation litigate about MTA subway safety here in New York. And I get it. We have really horrific, high profile crimes that happen. They shake the consciousness of the city. And yet that conversation does not match my reality as a New Yorker on the trains day to day. Similarly, obviously people are going to say, well, look at the Tenderloin in San Francisco. The whole state has gone up to hell, which obviously does not represent how incredible the state of California is. But what do you make here, Jen, of either that conversation of so many people moving from a place like California and going to a place like Texas, or in general, some of Siraj's points there about how the perceptions of the state have changed so much in really just the last few decades?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle to defend Gavin Newsom. I mean, in this particular instance, I'm mad that Trump was lying about situations that he says would have helped that wouldn't, about the fires. When it comes to Gavin, I don't know, because I lived in the Bay Area for 6 years. I never felt physically safe there. It's different in LA. I go to LA and I feel fine, and it's actually cleaned up a lot. During COVID, there was just the homeless situation went out of control. A lot of that has been cleaned up, which is nice, but the Bay Area honestly scares me. And I'm someone who lived there for a long time. So I don't think that I'm speaking out of turn and, just coming in, going to the Tenderloin and going out. Like I lived there. So I think there's real criticisms to be had. And when it comes to, what's happening with the fires, I don't think there's going to be a great red pilling of Californians after this, because the Republicans can talk as much, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on the show, as much trash as they want. But they're not offering any solution. So it's like the stuff that I have that I would criticize Karen Bass for, I would also criticize the Republicans for. So for instance, everybody right now is angry that in the most recent budget, they apparently cut the firefighters by tens of millions of dollars and redirected a lot of that money to the LAPD. This is something the Republicans are more than happy to do, to overfund the police.
They're not in charge.
No, I know that.
Democrats have had a stronghold in power for pretty much as long as I can remember, for as long as I've been alive.
I'm aware. I'm a Californian. It's a blue city. It's a blue state. But this is exactly what I'm saying. I think that because I've had this conversation on Instagram with my fellow Californians all day today. And when I was criticizing Karen Bass, they came back with, but the Republicans are worse. And there is a lot of validity to that. So I think what's going to happen is if people get politicized, which in LA, that's a big if. But if they do get politicized after this, I think they're going to be looking for different Democrats. And I think part of the problem is that they're not really willing to hold the Democrats accountable. In fact, they were so uncomfortable with me even criticizing the Democrats because they're so afraid of people turning to the Republicans and making things worse. So I don't think that the Republicans are going to benefit from this because what I've witnessed is people are protecting the Democrats because they're so afraid of that situation. So I don't know how much is going to change, honestly, because just in general in the country, people don't seem to want to hold the Democrats accountable for increasingly behaving more corporate and militarized like the Republicans are. The reason I left the Republican Party is also because of my anti-war feelings. And now it's the Democrats that are funding, Ukraine and a genocide in Gaza. So it's I have nowhere to turn. But in my experience today, people are just defending the Democrats as they always do. So I don't see anything changing there. And that's one of the reasons that I'm in a good mood because I'm speaking to you all today, but I've been feeling very sad and hopeless in these last 3 days because I don't see any changes on the horizon, and I think they're needed.
Yeah, of course. And I appreciate the honesty. First of all, I love the way you got former Democrat or former liberal, former Republican or former something. Regardless of what you were and what you are, we've had political evolutions, which I think is a good thing. I've never liked this gotcha game that we do with politicians a lot, which is 28 years ago during one interview, you said this and now answer for it. And it's dude, I don't want to vote for anyone who believes the same shit you did 28 years ago. That tells me you're not a good faith player. You're not taking into account new information. You're not growing as an individual. I want someone to be yeah, you know what? Absolutely. X number of years ago, I believe this other thing, and now I don't. I got smarter. Actually, I think Fetterman does do that a fair bit because I think Siraj mentioned Fetterman earlier on. Or any politician who's just yeah, you know what? I was wrong. Even when I ran for office, I used to think this, and I don't think this way anymore because times change, information changes, technology changes, and I've become a smarter person in the process. Okay, we got one other kind of fun topic we're going to get to. One more visit with our sponsors because we love our sponsors so much. Siraj and Jen hang out for us. Folks, if you're serious about investing, you got to know about public.com. It's where you can invest in everything, stocks, options, bonds, crypto. They offer some of the highest yields in the industry, like the bond account, 6% or higher yield that stays locked in, even as Jerome Powell and his friends at the Fed continue to cut interest rates. What sets Public apart from the rest is how they give you the tools you need to make informed investment decisions. Their built-in AI tool, it's called Alpha. It's absolutely awesome. I encourage you to play around with it. It doesn't just tell you if an asset's moving, it tells you why, it gives you that context. You can actually grasp what is driving the portfolio performance, the numbers, what's moving up, what's moving down, and why are you seeing those securities move the way they are. Investing for those who take it seriously, public.com/CT to learn more. Jen, Siraj, we're about out of time, but I do want to ask you because we got this, it's kind of a bit of developing news today. It's the whole TikTok thing, the banning TikTok thing. The bit of news to me is a little bit of kind of media messaging from the company on the eve of the Supreme Court expected to take up this case tomorrow. TikTok says it plans to shut down U.S. operations unless the Supreme Court strikes down the law that would force it to sell. The too long didn't read for people who don't watch the news all the time, and I'm very jealous of you if you don't, is that starting January 19th, this law is supposed to go into effect. Conveniently, ironically, whatever you want to call it, the day before Inauguration Day. Trump wants to avoid that. He wants to handle it himself. Jen, let me start to you. Your thoughts on I guess let me ask you your Trump perspective, because 2020 Trump said, we got to get rid of TikTok. 2025 Donald Trump seems to sing a little bit of a different TikTok tune on this issue. How do you see this playing out, Jen?
I'm honest. I don't really know what's going to happen here, because the way the so-called ban was crafted is incredibly clever. It actually doesn't ban TikTok. Instead, what it does is it punishes the company that enabled TikTok to be served to the American people. So instead of TikTok being banned, what it would do is it would say, okay, Oracle, you've been hosting all of their data. You are going to be fined out of existence if you keep doing that. It also says to Google and Apple, who provide the TikTok app in their stores, if you continue to do that, you're also going to get existential fines. The fines are enormous. And it's not just TikTok. This bill, which is now law, is actually a huge expansion of presidential power. So the way it was structured, it doesn't say that this only applies to TikTok. It applies to any websites, apps, and there was another category as well. But if they are even partially owned by someone who is from a country that is on a list, then they're eligible for this same treatment. So the fact that it's not targeting just the company, the fact that it's not a First Amendment issue, because it really isn't, because it wouldn't just be social media platforms. It could be, it says websites. It's that broad. The fact that it's being challenged on a First Amendment basis, I actually think this one might stand. It was so clever the way they wrote it. And it's so disturbing to me how few people in the media seem to have read this thing, because they don't seem to be freaking out about the power grab that this really is for the executive branch. So I think that the American people might be really surprised when the Supreme Court comes back and says, like, yeah, this isn't a First Amendment issue. This one stands. And I think they also might be surprised that it's American companies that are actually the target of it. They're the ones that would get punished. So I think TikTok making this announcement makes a lot of sense. I think they want the outrage. They want Gen Z to be loud. I think they want the noise. But legally, this was a well-crafted bill. And I say that as someone who really hates that bill, but it was smart the way they did it.
Siraj, to me, I'll give you the final word on this one here before we wrap here quick. Siraj, this to me was like, during the campaign, the new innovative media strategy for the Trump campaign. They made a TikTok. They took it to Trump. They're like, look how well your TikTok did. And he's sitting there and he's like, I love TikTok. I'm sure there's a lot of other factors at play. You got the Susquehanna guy who owns, has got like some stake in ByteDance. Siraj, what do you make either of the change in tone that some, and Donald Trump's not the only one, now kind of has on TikTok?
Well, look, TikTok is a very valuable communications tool. There's no lie. There's no denying that. I think the idea is that they wanted to push out the Chinese influence through ByteDance and I think Tencent. I don't know if Tencent actually has I think Tencent's more Discord, but basically for the national security interest, because the massive collection and harvesting of American data, for one, on top of TikTok also making people dumber. I wouldn't say TikTok. I'd say cell phones as a whole have made people dumber. And I'm obviously, guilty of it too. I've definitely become more retarded since I've gotten the cell phone. But when it comes to TikTok, look, Trump sees it as a valuable communications tool. I don't think he wants it actually to be banned, because he understands that it's a very popular tool that a lot of Americans use. But it's always been used. It's always been with the condition that they get the Chinese influence out of it. I know Kevin O'Leary, what's his name from Shark Tank, has potentially, Mr. Wonderful. That's what I was thinking of, his nickname. That he's trying to get in on that deal to purchase TikTok. And look, I don't want TikTok to necessarily be banned. I would love it if an American company or entity ended up retaining control of it, and potentially use that, selling that data to the American government so they could spy on us in different ways. But that being said, I mean, I agree with Jen. It's not a First Amendment issue because TikTok doesn't have a monopoly on communications. And so I hadn't had the chance to read the bill, but I imagine that the way that Jen describes it, it must be pretty well crafted if it doesn't even pass the Jen Briney test.
I love the idea of the U.S. government saying, hey, no one spies on our citizens except for us, which maybe really that's kind of like the whole goal. Like maybe, it's kind of a bit, but it's actually kind of like, listen, the NSA and the CIA only, folks. All right. You stay out of our business. All right. We got time for one more fan favorite segment.
Say something
nice.
Say Something Nice, sponsored by Public. We wrap every show with this. Siraj, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to give Jen the last words, her first time on with us. The point of this segment is just to say something nice about either the other side or those that you tend to disagree with. They could be political operatives, members of Congress, parts of the electorate that have just really frustrated you. But we always like to end with a little bit of optimism. Siraj, first to you here, my man. Say something nice.
I actually have to say something nice about my debate opponent, Jen Briney. I think she's actually I have only met you this one time, but you give me the sense that you're actually a free thinking individual and just you don't fall into partisan lines. And I appreciate that. So thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Jen, how about for you in this moment of heated political debate and rhetoric? We're just looking for a little bit of common ground, some common threads here. Say something nice, Jen. What do you got?
Well, you stole my idea because I was also going to compliment my so-called opposition. When we met off the air, you were calling me the opposition, and yet here we found common ground multiple times. And so, yeah, I just found this conversation just so pleasant and not adversarial at all. And it just, like I said, I've been feeling very sad and hopeless the last few days, and this conversation made me feel a lot better. I haven't felt this good since the fire started. So thank you for having me.
That's absolutely awesome to hear, and you're both welcome back on the show anytime. Maybe the three of us could do this again. Very grateful for your time, and then Jen, most personally to you, our absolute best. You, your sister, your entire family, the entire community impacted out there in LA. We got the QR code up there as well for the Red Cross. So Jen, we send you our absolute best, and Siraj, my man, you and your family. All the best as well, and a very happy New Year.
I thought you were gonna say all the worst there, JD. Which honestly,
all the worst, dude. I almost did. I was kind of like, dude, just like, get out of here. You say the worst.
Honestly, I probably do deserve a lot worse than I have it.
All right, I'm glad you said it because I've been sitting here the whole hour thinking it, being like, God, this dude's done really well for himself, and he's like the worst dude I've ever met. That's Jen Briney, host of the Congressional Dish podcast, co-host of We're Not Wrong, Siraj Hashmi, co-founder of Habibi Bros, creator of the list of accounts that need their phone taken. Jen, Siraj, my best to you both. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was absolutely awesome. I know this is always the time of the show. We're going to clap. Yeah, we're clapping it up. Jen, Siraj absolutely crushed it. Because, you bring in people who, maybe kind of are on different, I feel like if we're all kind of in different places of the general political conversation, so you never know kind of where they're naturally going to overlap. It's a very polite golf clap, but I'll take a polite golf clap. That's like a really nice approach shot there. What else do we have to hit on the show? Is there anything that you and I need to jam on here, Taylor?
Great comments. Why don't we go through our favorites?
Oh, let's go through our comments. Oh, we got killer comments tonight on the show. I definitely want to hear what people have to say. I'm not going to know all the answers, but I don't know. Sometimes I just like to wax on as if I do. I miss simpler times when the biggest political issue was Hillary Clinton's emails. But her emails, God, remember the whole email thing? Like, I think, we could look back to like 2015, 2016 and just be totally stunned. We're like reminding ourselves like, God, that was an entire controversy. That was like an entire scandal we all lived through. But yeah, the Secretary Clinton things are like a big deal. That's Jen, I believe. She has a secret server in her basement. Yes. No. That's totally fair. Right. The secret server in the basement thing. Yeah, it was absolutely, that was not, we still sit there and I'm like, God, that really happened. I feel like the last decade's been a lot of like, wow, that really happened. Like the pandemic. among many other things. Anyway, all right, what are other good comments that we got? And thank you everyone for not just for tuning in, but then hitting us with your amazing comments, your questions, how you view things. The most blatant example of Democrats' incompetence and their lack of willingness to change, says Dan from last night, is the recent loss of a majority on the NLRB, I believe that's the National Labor Relations Board, because of a procedural error. Dan from last night, bringing in the question for tonight. I got to be honest with you, I don't know this one. I don't know the procedural error of the Labor Relations Board story, but we're going to look it up, and maybe we'll do something on the show for it next week because I appreciate the context, and I always like to learn along with you. Dan also says Trump's rhetoric is a known factor. It's a losing battle to try and complain about it at this point. He is the way he is. You know, I remember when people were waiting, they're like, oh, when does this presidential pivot happen? And people being like, dude, he's almost 80. He's not going to change the way he is. He's an 80-year-old man. What are you talking about? You're going to have this big pivot. It's like, no, I think that's a great comment. You know what you're getting. I have wondered, I might be alone in this thinking. I felt like there's been like a softening of Trump. And I don't know if it was the events in Butler into the election. I don't know what it is. And that may come back to haunt me because we're going to sit there 6 months from now and be like, JD, remember when you said there was a softening of Trump? And now he's absolutely unhinged in his second time in the presidency, but it could happen. Singletown says Greenland. Oh, I like that one. We hope your sister is doing okay, Jen. Yes, most importantly for the show tonight, our absolute best to Jen and her family. Can we pull up the comment that was up there before? Here we go. Singletown. Greenland's not for sale. Why does Americans think that way? You can't buy everything for money. America, you are not the New York Yankees. Or I should actually say you're not the New York Mets now. I can't believe I'm saying that. You can't just throw money. You can't just get the Juan Soto of the world. Greenland is not Juan Soto. You cannot throw endless dollars at it and expect that Greenland is just going to fall into your map. That was the perfect strikeout noise. That's real local, like we say, like local ball here in New York. The Mets and Yankees, that's what you play after a strikeout at Yankee Stadium and Citi Field. So if Trump wants to do a military intervention, that would be the end of NATO. Good luck with that. Google Danish resistance during World War II. Yeah, right. So if you do military intervention, that's the other thing. It's like you've got that provision of NATO that protects NATO powers from military intervention by others, but military intervention in Greenland would, I guess, on a note of technicality, be the U.S. encroaching on Denmark's sovereign territory to a large degree. It gets very messy. But again, remember, they've been having their own pro-independence conversations for quite some time before all this took up. Fuzzy Dunlap says, I met Siraj for the first time in a Washington, D.C. bathhouse. What a heck of a nice fella. Yes, Siraj. Well, I'm going to say yes. I don't know if that's true. Nickelodeon says, great show, y'all. Thank you. I will say about Siraj, because I do know Siraj from D.C. We were both living there. We were both working as reporters during the first Trump presidency. And Siraj, just pound for pound, is one of the funniest human beings I've ever met. By far, one of the funniest human beings in all of political media. And I do encourage both of you, please go listen to Jen's shows. Go follow Jen on all social media platforms. She does an incredible job. And Jen does a lot with other friends of the show. We've had Andrew Heaton, Justin Robert Young as well. And then for Siraj, please go follow Siraj on everything. Listen to his shows. And definitely check out The List. He just used to call it The List. When the List launched, it was must reading on Twitter by, I felt like, the entire world. Every day you would wait to see Siraj would tweet, this list of like top 10 people who need to have their phones taken away because they had tweeted something horrific the day before. I'm not talking about like random accounts. These were like, he was going after like members of Congress, cabinet officials, just people who just kind of like missed the mark on social media. And Siraj's aggregation of all of that was like the single funniest read, continues to be the single funniest read. And I can't encourage it enough. Folks, that's our show. Special thanks, of course, to our sponsor, as always, Public. Special thanks to Siraj Hashmi and Jen Briney. We will be back. There we go. I'm ending on a high note, too. We'll be back next Thursday night at 7, live from Brooklyn, New York, with a whole new show, 2 new guests for a whole new hour. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.